All right, guys, we did it. This is the first episode of the Conscious Environment Podcast. This week, I was able to actually sit down with Tony Nabors, the creator of Racial Equity Insights, and have a conversation about call-out culture versus call-in culture. What's the difference? What are they? What does it all mean? And how does it fit into your day-to-day life? I hope you enjoy.
So we're going to be talking about call-out culture versus call-in culture. This has been a topic that has... I think it's always been like a point of debate for a while between folks of what's the best way to do it. But for some of the folks who don't know you from me, Tony, tell us who you are, sir.
Yeah, sure thing. So I'm Tony Nabors. I'm the founder and owner of Racial Equity Insights. I primarily work with businesses that are really trying to figure out this racial equity stuff. Not about check boxes, not about check marks, but how do we actually get it so it's actually in the organizational DNA, really making true change both internally, externally, and so on and so forth. So strategy, workshops, coaching, all that kind of thing is the main of what I do.
Awesome.
Introduce yourself as well, please. You gotta let my folks know.
Yeah, so I'm Ryan Howes. I am founder of Conscious Environment Creation, working with businesses, companies, whoever personal. I've had a couple of people just reach out just for kind of personal consultation on anti-racism work and how that can, function in their day-to-day life. All sort of started from this social media thing of just teaching folks that I knew, and then kind of got a little bit bigger. So here we are, and I love teaching, man. I like doing this stuff. So
it's clear because you are excellent at it. So it's good to join you here, sir. Good to join you.
Yeah. So, Tony, what are your thoughts on if someone was to ask you what is a call out? If you were to call somebody out, what would that be, and how would you use it if you would use it?
Yeah, so for me, calling out is basically when someone says something just wild or out of pocket or racist or sexist or something that's just inappropriate and harmful to a marginalized group. And you got to basically sort of almost kind of match that energy and just kind of name it immediately, right, straight out the gate. It might be that you're at a company meeting, or maybe you're at a family gathering, or whatever the case is, and then someone makes a joke about a racial group, or someone makes whatever comment or thoughts or whatever. Mm-hmm. And basically it's in public setting. Everybody hears a comment and someone has to say, nah, hold up. We're not doing that here. Or like that's racist. And let me tell you why that's racist, or, whatever your approach might be. Right. Basically stopping harm in its tracks. Right. And, making it very clear that that's not okay.
Right. Yeah. So completely agree. Good night, Talia.
Sounds like your baby agrees too. The little one agrees too.
That's the one that's always giving the anti-racism tip. She's learning.
She knows what's up.
So I did a video the other day, and I kind of mentioned that calling out is when someone's behavior, you have to let them know that their behavior is unacceptable immediately. And the point, just like you said, Tony, is to mitigate harm. We're stopping it in its tracks. So call outs is why it kind of gets this bad rap, is you see it as a more aggressive type of thing. It is a bit more confrontational. It doesn't have to be, but a lot of times the person who's being called out or being accused of such, they get a little bit more defensive. Hopefully it's a faux pas and they've just made a mistake, but sometimes they kind of double down a little bit and you have to have a little bit of a conversation. But the goal is, especially for people who aren't part of the marginalized group. So speaking to those who aren't part of the group, and this could go for anything. Like we talk a lot about anti-racism work, but that isn't all of that we're talking about. This could be, they make a joke about disabled people, the R word, any group of people, LGBTQ plus. It normally manifests like a joke or something like that. I like to say Schrodinger's asshole. You never, you're not sure if the person's kidding until they're pressed about it, and then they're joking, or they're not sometimes, which is worse.
Yeah.
I think calling out can be good, can be used effectively if the goal always is to stop the harm straight in its tracks. So this person who's either in the group, in the area, that can hear it. Maybe it's not safe for that person to speak up, or they don't feel comfortable. Like if they're part of a marginalized group and they're the only person of that is representative of that group, it may be best for somebody else who's of the majority to speak up and say, hey, in this place, this is not acceptable, and let them know that your presence is not a safe space to say insert racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic, etc. thing in front of you. You are not going to allow that kind of thing to be said. I would encourage people when doing some sort of call outs or anything like that, don't presume to speak for the other person. So a way to do it, I kind of coined it self-induced call-outs. I guess, Tony, after I say this, you give me, if you have an example of something that you've done or what works. Self-induced call-out is basically kind of playing dumb a little bit with it. So let the person say whatever they're going to say, they say it. And then ask them to clarify. So they tell this joke, this racist joke, and then just kind of look at them and... what do you mean by that? Wait for everybody to be done laughing or awkwardly posing and standing there. And what do you mean? What do you mean by what you just said? And usually, because we have such a culture of acceptance, and especially in corporate America, we hate confrontation. It's uncouth. We don't like doing it. Oftentimes people sort of are used to getting away with those kinds of statements, even if they know it's wrong, or it's an off-color joke or locker room talk or whatever you want to say. Asking them to clarify is probably one of the easiest ways to get them to hear what they're saying out loud. Because when you have to explain the joke, you really got to explain what's funny about it. And most of the time, the punchline is the marginalized group that we're talking about. Tony, I don't know if you have any tips or anything like that of how you've had or advice that you've given to people. Like someone says, "Hey, I have this coworker that's always telling offensive jokes. You know, what's a way that I can do something about it?"
Yeah, so I mean that's definitely one of my favorites that you just did, is just sort of asking questions and kind of playing like you don't get it, playing ignorant, to really make them express and put it all the way out there in terms of what they're talking about.
Right. Yeah.
And that you're making me think of I'm thinking of a kind of a couple of different frameworks in my mind at the same time, because I see that as just really sort of any sort of iteration of a microaggression as well. That's a really good sort of approach to that. I think about that feels like a really good approach when you're having kind of these one-on-one sort of situations where there's maybe a little bit more time to kind of walk them down that path, where it becomes really clear, like, yeah, you're being gross and I'm not here for it, but I'm allow you to sort of, wrap your own self up in that. Where that might not be as possible if it's, say, like maybe like a work meeting. And, maybe it's not even like a gross comment, but it's just something that's like, whoa, you just expressed this idea about XYZ customer that are black, and no one even blinked that was a super racist thing that just happened right there,
Right. Yeah.
Or it might even be, I'll tell you something where this was even kind of more subtle at a previous job that I had, where I was a director and there were coworkers who were directors, and it was sort of like a mixed audience meeting where we're talking about XYZ specifically related to DEI. And I can't remember the exact comment that this colleague made, but it was another director that was sort of going down this pathway in terms of this DEI conversation, kind of almost indicating that there was like so much to do that it's almost like, oh, we'll never be able to get anywhere with this. Like, again, I don't remember what her exact comment was, but it was something where it's like a director who was sort of casting doubts on us prioritizing DEI. And so, it was like in the midst of this dialogue conversation that we're having. And I basically said to her, and I was facilitating the conversation, and I said, yeah, that comment's not especially helpful right now. So, how about instead of that, like let's talk about this instead. It's basically because when a director says something that's basically kind of casting shade on our racial equity work,
Right.
that can have such bigger impacts. So I basically had to interrupt that straight out the gate and say, yeah, that comment's not helpful, but we need to go over here instead with it.
Right. Yeah.
And it was interesting because this particular individual definitely felt a kind of way after that. Because it was like a mixed group of people. There were non-directors in the meeting too, to the point where she reached out to me after the meeting. And it was so interesting because this is something where, especially when you're addressing racial microaggressions or racial issues or racial things, period, that might need a call out or warrant a call out.
Right.
It's so interesting how white people in particular can respond to kind of this stuff. Uh-oh, what just happened? I'm echoing now. Okay, I'm not echoing anymore. Thank you for whatever you just did. But what was interesting is that she wanted to follow up with me after the fact and basically saying that she didn't appreciate that basically I embarrassed her in that meeting.
Oh, no.
And it was interesting because she said that I told her that she was not helpful. Sorry, on my comments, DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion. Thank you for that question. So it's so interesting where I called out the comments, but she received it as if I was saying that she was not helpful. So I just thought that was so interesting. I'm like, no, that's not what I said. Like, this is what I said. Here's why I said it. And here's why I would say it again. Because when you're a director, you can't communicate like that in terms of this mission that we're trying to push through and we're trying to get across. And I think that especially in sort of corporate or business settings, I think a lot of people shy away from call outs because of this fear of embarrassing the person.
Right.
And I feel like we need to figure out what our priorities are when there is harm that is happening or is on the way to happening to marginalized people. That we prioritize the person that's causing the harm and we prioritize their reputation as opposed to marginalized people who are already experiencing all these things in society and probably at the workplace too. And so I did a workshop maybe a week ago where this kind of came up it was a microaggressions workshop that I was doing for a group of organizations. And it was interesting where a person was even basically saying that, hey, sometimes you got to be careful how you respond to these microaggressions because, you don't want to embarrass the person. And I have actually made content where I say that embarrassment is a very underrated teacher. Sometimes people need to get embarrassed so they know better and so they do better. And so I have no problem with having somebody look a little silly in public because I have been made to look silly in public when I was out of pocket. And some of those lessons I received, I have never forgotten decades later. Because, I made a comment and someone asked me the question hey, you tell me more. What do you mean by that? What did you have, and then I've just sort of had my version of it. I did. And then I had to think about it. Why did I say that? Why did I do that? Yeah. So, I feel like definitely kind of piercing through the faux pas. I'll say the faux pas-ness. I'll make up a word, the faux pas-ness of embarrassing people and of making someone look bad because we should care more about marginalized people. And, we as, even people who might be leaders or they might be a person of influence in whatever sphere, we should care enough about the most vulnerable people around us that we should want someone to call us out if we say something that's off kilter or whatever the case might be.
Right. Yeah. No, exactly. And I had someone in my comments. I don't know how it works. Are our comment sections different? Do you see something different than I see?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. So that is the worst thing about I don't know why they do this. When we co-host,
right.
We I think we both have a way of reaching out to our audiences, but our comment sections are separate, which I don't know why that is. No. So your comments are not the same as mine, and I'm seeing people in my comments.
Yeah, I'm seeing people.
And I'm saying some good stuff that I want to shout out really quick. And then you just if you see something that needs to be elevated, just shout it out, Ryan, because I don't see it.
Right.
But Claudia is saying on mine, interrupting bad performances can seem combative to folks who are fighting for dominance. Claudia's dropping all kinds of gems. You're not making folks look bad. You're helping the room stop acting in denial. I see my guy, Tales of Gardem, who has the amazing content on Night Skins. My brother talking about, hey, it's giving those who are oppressed and want equity and equality, those in power. It's giving those who are oppressed, basically giving them equity and equality, and those in power feel threatened in those types of situations, for sure. It's like, are you familiar with Darvo? So Darvo, let me see. I always kind of, someone in the comments help me if I mess up the acronym. But it's deny, attack, reverse, victim, and offender. So it's basically a strategy of emotional violence and manipulation. Thank you. Yeah, Claudia's dropping. It's helping me out in the chat. Yeah, deny, attack, reverse, victim, and offender. And so absolutely, it's something that happens when marginalized people speak out about harm that's happening to us, or even if we call out a thing that we see that might be related to other marginalized groups. It's sort of the calling out that's the real harm. Like, how could you say this? I didn't even mean this in this way. Like, everything was all good until you said this thing, and you're the wrong person. And to just be like really frank and honest with it. Especially, I'm just thinking about the workplace again. That's a really rough place to be in, especially when leadership doesn't care about this stuff, or leadership it doesn't consider it a priority. Where I have definitely seen people that rightfully, I had a workshop where someone was talking about, hey, I did this in my organization and I actually got reprimanded for this, which sucks, And so, it really sucks because it requires, I think, a lot of courage and discernment to kind of figure out what's the right space to do a call out. And I know we'll talk more about that a little bit later on. But, it's real that sometimes there can be a cost to calling out, to naming racism, to naming all, any other sort of isms that might be in a room.
Right.
And so, just understanding that sometimes that's part of the journey, sometimes that's part of the process. But I think, especially when we are discerning and we know it's necessary. So I think in general, it's so important for all of us to recognize our relative privilege in all these kind of different identity categories. And a lot of times people aren't really thinking that multidimensional. Even a lot of times with other Black men, there's this awareness of oppression that we experience as Black people, but there's sort of a lack of connection to power and privilege that we experience, as men, and especially cisgender, heterosexual, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of harm that comes across and comes through in those spaces. So it's just really important that we understand and recognize our kind of relative power, and understanding that we can be oppressors in some of those spaces. So it's important to, be able to speak up and recognize and identify that, hey, it might be a room full of Black men, but if some misogynist, sexist stuff is going down, I think in general, the pressure should be on who has whatever that relative privilege is in the room to speak out and say something and to disrupt that.
Exactly. What would you say a call-in is, and when you do it?
Yeah, so I think it's definitely important to first identify that absolutely there are two different, I would say, strategies in terms of disrupting oppressive harm. A call-in is more relational. I'd say a call-in especially might be more appropriate if it's something offensive that is said in private. Maybe it's you and an office mate, and they make kind of the side comment that is kind of off. Or it might be a space where maybe there's a power dynamic where maybe you have more power than the other person in terms of whatever the situation might be, and they say something that might be kind of offensive or oppressive or harmful. Basically, a call-in is, I want to circle back around with this person, maybe after the fact or later on, maybe, hey, can we get lunch? I wanted to talk to you about this thing that happened at the meeting, or this thing that you said. It's more relational, where basically you're wanting to walk with them and have a conversation, or have some mentoring opportunities, or just some way to unpack the harmful thing that's happened with them, so they can more thoroughly understand why it was harmful and what something better would be to do in the future. And so, a separate strategy, but I think it's very important that we have the full range of tools, and don't necessarily think that, calling out is always wrong or calling in is always wrong, but, figuring out to have that discernment.
Right.
I'd say, for white folks that are listening and watching, if a person of color ever calls you in for something racist that you might have said or done or whatever the case is, treat that as if it is a precious treasure that they have given you, because it requires so much emotional energy to do that. And oftentimes we're very much ignored or dismissed or not believed. And or sometimes even, the manipulations can happen to try to tell us that we are just tripping and bugging out or whatever the case is. So it truly is a gift when a marginalized person takes the time to call you in. And I hope that people will receive it as such. And I want to get, so there's a thing I wanted to mention before, and then I forgot about it, and I'm thinking about it now. And this idea about calling out and calling in. And sometimes, it's it takes a little time, I think, to even kind of figure out what makes the most sense, what's the best strategy, depending on whatever the situation might be. But whatever you do, don't be a secret ally. Have you ever heard the phrase secret ally? That basically is where something happens in whatever the public setting might be, or the meeting, or whatever the case is. Somebody says something, racist or offensive, or whatever the case is. And, maybe there's one person of whatever the marginalized identity is, or very few in the room.
Right.
And nobody says anything. Hold on, I'm going to put this back on the tripod. But then somebody sends the email to somebody after the fact, like, oh, man, Ryan, I can't believe that so-and-so said that in that meeting.
Right.
Like, oh, that was so messed up. I'm so sorry that happened. That was just really messed up that happened. That's being a secret ally. Because then my response, if someone, sends me that kind of message, is like, okay, it's nice you're sending me this text, but why didn't you say something in the meeting?
Yeah.
Or why are you talking to me? Like, why don't you
talk to them?
I just had to sit there and kind of take it, and nobody said anything. Nobody had my back. Nobody defended me. But you're probably feeling guilty, so you're going to kind of send me this email after the fact, which doesn't really do too much to actually disrupt what I or whoever the person might be has been subjected to in that space.
Right.
So don't be a secret ally. Call out, call in, whatever strategies you might want to go to, but don't be a secret ally. That does not feel good, and it does not help.
We're running. We're going over time, but thanks for everybody joining late. Pop in some questions, and we'll do like a follow-up video or something to answer some questions.
For sure. But I just wanted to say really quick, that's something that's one of the things that Dr. Ibram X. Kendi talks about that I like. I don't love all of his stuff, but one thing that he talks about that I really like is talking about racism, not in terms of an identity, but talking about racism in terms of specific behaviors and beliefs and ideas, basically.
Right.
And the fact that during the course of a day, you may do some things that are anti-racist. You may also do some other things that are racist. Mm-hmm. And that we need to, be accountable to our behaviors and our ideas, and the thoughts that we might entertain, and et cetera, et cetera. And that's what happens, is that when we are calling out a behavior, people receive it as if we are saying that this is a horrifying, terrible, irredeemable person that should rot in the pits of hell. Right. Sometimes there might be those that are saying that, but neither here nor there. Sometimes when there's a legit, like, recorded on video, this is a terrible thing that this person has done.
Right.
People are reacting as if we are attacking this person's right to live on this earth as a human.
Right.
And then that just creates all kinds of issues where it's like, I don't necessarily care who this person is as a person, but this behavior is not okay. And we need to deal and address this behavior so we can, go do better going forward.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. And another kind of way that he helped me formulate my opinion of racism or racist. I was just talking to somebody about this last night. I'm trying to formulate this into a thought so I can get you out of here. But this idea that racism is a system, and power is one of the most intricate parts of it. So a capital R racist thing and racism exists within a system. Now, outside of that, you can have racial prejudice, and you can have people who, for lack of a better term, are just assholes. You can have people who are just mean, and they do mean things, but a lack of power stops them from being able to perform and function within racism. And we confuse this with white supremacy, because you could do things that uphold white supremacy that feed into the racist system, but you yourself as an individual, and I think that's something that we need to get away from, is individual acts from one person to another person aren't necessarily performing in racism. It may be kind of like a racist thought or a racially prejudiced ideal, but if you don't have the power to back it up, then it just is traumatic for the person experiencing it, and not much more than just that. So this person actually asked me, she was like, well, is there a situation in which a marginalized group or like for example, black people, can black people be racist? Can black people do a racist thing? And I was like, there's a lot of debate on this, but I think in specific examples, yes, they can. If Obama said on TV while he was president that he's going to put all black people in cages, that would be racist because he's the president. If Clarence Thomas declares that interracial marriage is illegal because blacks and whites shouldn't mix, he's the Supreme Court justice. Yes, that's racist because he has the power to back that up, to be able to do it. And there's just a few situations in which those things can happen. But I think the crux of what I'm trying to say is that we need to get away from this idea that racism is simply and only individual acts of meanness between two people, because that's going to end up having us get into these situations where we're defending somebody's like personhood or who they are instead of addressing just what they did. Because and another thing, I don't know the person who said it, but it was, there's a lot of white people that feel as though being called a racist is worse than the racism that was performed or the racist thing that was said. Like being called racist is the worst thing that can ever happen to you, because it has become some sort of identifier, this identity, but it isn't. Just what you did is racist or works in this racist system. You're still you. You can change, and full circle. And that's how me and Tony will have jobs, is because we teach you to stop doing that, and then you're still who you are. So Tony, thank you again. I know you're hosting on your side, but I got some folks on here. So if you want to say who you are and please go follow Tony on this app. He has awesome videos and just a lot of education, and then jump right over to his website because there's even more videos and stuff there. But if you want to plug something else or anything like that, let the people know.
Sure. For sure. And I want you to do that too for my audience as well. So Tony Nabors, Racial Equity Insights. I'm on TikTok and Instagram at Racial Equity Insights. I'm on LinkedIn. Just look for Tony Nabors, Nabors. I work with businesses that are trying to figure out racial equity game plans. And you can find my website, which is racialequityinsights.com. And I must say it's a pretty good looking website. I think it's a good website. I wanted to check it out, just looking at the design sense, but that's how people can get a hold of me. I also have on-demand e-coursework too. So you can do your own thing individually and learn your stuff as well as figuring things out on a larger business or organization level too.
Cool.
And Ryan, please share who you are as well. Y'all need to Ryan, I feel like you about to be blowing up in the very near future because you have such a brilliance. I mean that. I'm not gassing you. You have such a brilliance to your teaching, and people need to hear your voice. So please do your plugs as well.
Yeah, so I'm Ryan Howes. Hey, Tony fans. I'm Ryan Howes. I am in the midst of building conscious environment creation. I got to thank my wife for that name. I was like, I got to come up with a cool name. She was like, this one, see, it'll be catchy. But conscious environment creation, and we're working in the same field because there's millions and millions of businesses, and they all need our help. So we work to teach people about diversity, equity, and inclusion, trainings, anti-racism work, kind of a focus on my wheelhouse is anti-racism work, but we talk about all kinds of marginalized groups, different BIPOC and women's groups, disabilities, and all kinds of stuff like that. You can follow me here at iDefOverthink. The Instagram is the same, iDefOverthink, and that's going to be a little copy paste of the videos, and then ryanhowes.com, because I don't have a much fancier website yet, but that website's building and that'll be linked up soon. So but I do want to just say we're going to be doing this. Hopefully you guys like this every Thursday. I'm going to be doing this at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, whatever else in the middle, because I'm not doing all that math. But yeah, we're going to be talking about different lessons and catch me with different guests. Thank you so much, Tony. It's a pleasure. I am glad to legitimately call you a friend and mentor of mine. I really do appreciate you so much, man. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, brother. It's an honor. It's a joy. Let's absolutely do this again.
Yeah. So thank you all for coming and hanging out, but we're going to log off here. Peace, guys.
All right, take care, everybody.
Hey guys, I hope you really enjoyed that as much as I enjoyed recording it for you. Remember, we do record these things live every single Thursday at 7 p.m. on TikTok. You can find me over there at IDEFF Overthink, iDefOverthink, and that's right over there on TikTok. And again, 7 p.m. Thursday night, we record live. There's a little extra stuff in there. We get a little silly while we're on the live, and some of that doesn't make it on the podcast. So check it out. We're going to be here. But I hope you guys enjoyed the inaugural episode, and I'll see you next week.